So this is a video that I have been planning to make for a while now, but I just never got around to it. After the Oklahoma City Thunder made the playoffs and unbelievably took the Houston Rockets to 7 games, I have been sitting on this topic for a while because it's something that we didn't think would happen coming into the season. And not only did they take that team with James Harden and Russell Westbrook to 7 games, they were only one play away from winning. So I think it's worth having the conversation of just how valuable Chris Paul actually is. Not only that, but how great of a leader he is. Because throughout his career, you can only point to 2 seasons where he didn't lead a team to a playoff appearance. And those 2 seasons were his first 2 seasons in the NBA, with a recently relocated and rebuilding franchise, which is something huge to keep in mind. But since then, we've seen a Chris Paul-led team make the playoffs every single season, no matter how much they were doubted coming into the season. So what I wanted to do this video is go through Chris Paul's career, his accomplishments, and that will lead us to what shouldn't be an unpopular opinion, that Chris Paul is going to be one of the greatest point guards of all time, whether he wins a championship or not. But before we begin, if you're new here, I'm Double D. I'm a huge basketball fan and I make NBA videos here on YouTube. So if you're also an NBA fan, or just a basketball fan in general, feel free to hit the sub button, and click the bell to be notified when I upload more videos just like this one. Also, according to YouTube analytics, around 84% of you guys that watch my videos are still not subscribed, so I would really appreciate that. Alright, let's get into the video.
With the 4th pick in the 2004 NBA Draft, the New Orleans Hornets select Chris Paul from Wake Forest University.
Back in 2005, Chris Paul was drafted to the New Orleans Hornets with the 4th overall pick, and he was selected to a team that was rebuilding after the relocation from Charlotte and their decision to trade arguably their best player in Baron Davis to Golden State due to tensions between him and the staff, as well as his injury problems. So as a result, the Hornets finished the 2005 season with an 18-64 record. But Chris Paul came in and immediately had his work cut out for him, as the team would need to relocate once again to Oklahoma City for the time being, due to the destruction in New Orleans as a result of Hurricane Katrina. But still, Chris Paul would find his place in the league seemingly right away. In his first season in the league, he won Rookie of the Year while averaging 16.1 points, 5.1 rebounds, 7.8 assists, and 2.2 steals, which is insane for a first-year player during one of the slowest eras in league history. Fast forward to the 2008 season, where the Hornets are able to go back to their home city of New Orleans, and Chris Paul has the best season of his career up until that point, which isn't really saying much because it was his 3rd season. But he averaged 21.1 points, 4 rebounds, 11.6 assists, and 2.7 steals. He led the Hornets to 56 wins, and actually finished 2nd in MVP voting behind Kobe Bryant. They would lose in the 2nd round of the playoffs to the Spurs, but Chris Paul would put up 24.1 points, 4.9 rebounds, 11.3 assists, and 2.3 steals while shooting 50% from the field. It is worth noting that out of the 12 games Chris Paul played in that year's playoffs, he had 8 games with double-digit assists. And he continued the trend in the 2011 playoffs, facing the Lakers in the first round, where Chris Paul would average 22 points, 6.7 rebounds, 11.5 assists, and 1.8 steals, and took the defending champion Lakers to 6 games in the first round as a 7th seed. But we fast forward to the 2011 offseason, where we see one of the most confusing events in NBA history take place. Because Chris Paul was going to be a free agent in the 2011 offseason, the Hornets tried to find a trade package for him before he left in free agency, and they got nothing back in return. They settled on a 3-way deal with the Los Angeles Lakers and the Houston Rockets. This deal would have sent Chris Paul to LA, Pau Gasol to the Rockets, and Lamar Odom, Luis Scola, Goran Dragic, and Kevin Martin to New Orleans. The deal was actually official for about 45 minutes. Like, it actually happened. But less than an hour after it was agreed to by all 3 teams, the NBA pulled the plug on it. I've seen people say to this day, oh, they couldn't let Kobe play with Chris Paul, but they let KD go to Golden State. Like, those things are not related at all. The NBA has no input on free agency. They did, however, have a say in the Chris Paul trade because at the time, the NBA partially owned the Hornets. So that's really the main and simple reason why they had the power to do that. Do I think it's ridiculous that they vetoed it after it already happened? Of course. But that's what happened. So unable to trade Chris Paul to the Lakers, the Hornets would eventually find a trade to still send him to Staples Center, just to the team across the hall. The Hornets sent Chris Paul and 2 second-round picks to the Clippers in return for Eric Gordon, Chris Kaman, Al-Farouq Amino, and a first-round pick. From there, the Lob City era began, as the Clippers at the time had DeAndre Jordan and Blake Griffin, who were great defenders and great finishers at the rim, whose playstyles were thought to perfectly fit with Chris Paul. And over the next 2 seasons, that's exactly what we would find out, as the Clippers went from laughingstock of the NBA to winning 50 or more games in every season Chris Paul played for them, other than in 2012 because it was a lockout-shortened season, with Chris Paul undoubtedly being the leader of the team and one of the best point guards and two-way players in the league during those years. During his 6 seasons with the LA Clippers, he led the league in steals 3 times and led in assists twice. And he was actually all-defensive first team in every single season he played for the Clippers. Unfortunately, while seeing success during the regular season, the Clippers were never able to live up to their expectations in the playoffs. And this was for a number of reasons, but the main problem was injuries, especially to Chris Paul and Blake Griffin. In the first round of the 2015 playoffs, Chris Paul would end up injuring his hamstring, which he still played through because it was Game 7. He hit timely shots and he even hit the game winner. Unfortunately, he went on to miss the first 2 games of the second round series against the Houston Rockets, but he would eventually come back and the Clippers would blow a 3-1 lead. The next season in the playoffs, the Clippers were favored against a fairly young Trailblazers team, but in Game 4, the Clippers' curse takes over, as Chris Paul would break his hand and Blake Griffin would leave with a quad injury. So their best 2 players, gone in the same game and out for the series. And in 2017, the Clippers would go up against the Utah Jazz in the first round, a series in which Blake Griffin would again injure himself and be forced to miss the remainder of the series, which they ended up losing in 7 games. Overall in his time with the Clippers, Chris Paul would average 18.8 points, 4.2 rebounds, 9.8 assists, and 2.2 steals. In the 2017 offseason, after becoming more and more concerned with Chris Paul's age and injury problems, the Clippers decided to trade him to Houston in return for Lou Williams, Patrick Beverley, Sam Decker, Montrezl Harrell, Darren Hillard, DeAndre Liggins, and a first-round pick, as it was becoming more apparent that the Clippers wanted the franchise to go in a different direction and were likely looking to begin a rebuild, mainly due to the constant disappointment in the playoffs while Chris Paul was there. This trade created what was one of the most controversial duos in the NBA at the time in Chris Paul and James Harden, mainly due to both of them being ball-dominant guards, and James Harden coming off the season where he switched to point guard and finished second in MVP voting, so nobody knew how this was gonna work. But it worked out better than anyone could have thought. The Rockets would go on to win 65 games and claim the first seed in the West, even beating out Golden State. They blow through the first 2 rounds of the playoffs and face Golden State in the conference finals. They go up 3 games to 2, but at the end of Game 5, Chris Paul's injury history once again caught up to him.
Guarded by Cook, Paul on the spin, rebound Reed, 50 seconds.
Well, they might have to drag him because you know he's not going to come off the court. But he is hurt right now, limping, walking gingerly and slowly to the sideline. Again, look at the play on the other half of the court. This is the most important.
He would go on to miss the last 2 games of the series, and Golden State would go on to win in 7 games and advance to the finals. But Chris Paul had already gotten farther in the playoffs than he did in his entire career up until that point. And he probably still thinks to this day that Houston would have beaten Golden State if he were able to play in games 6 and 7. And so in free agency, he decided to sign a 4-year, $160 million contract with the Houston Rockets, with the goal of winning a championship, as they were sure they could have won in 2018. Like, very sure. Too sure. But in the 2019 playoffs, we would see the deal that Chris Paul signed begin to look very questionable, as he would underperform in the second round against Golden State, scoring just 17 points a game on 44% from the field and 27% from 3. So coming to the realization that the Houston Rockets are probably not going to get farther than they did in 2018, especially since the Lakers and Clippers had both improved to championship contenders in the same offseason, and the fact that Chris Paul had a terrible contract as he was 34 going on 35 years old, making more money than James Harden, the Rockets decided to trade him and picks to the OKC Thunder in return for Russell Westbrook. And from there, a lot of people, including myself and one of my friends who is a Thunder fan, we all thought that Chris Paul was going to be a good mentor for the young guys, but we had no expectation of ever seeing him on a winning team again. The Thunder came into the 2019-20 season with a 0.2% chance of making the playoffs, but as he proved time and time again in his career, any team with him on it can be a winning team. He would average 17.6 points, 5 rebounds, 6.7 assists, and 1.6 steals, and led the Thunder to 44 wins and the 6th seed in the Western Conference, where, as fate would have it, they would match up against his former team and teammate in James Harden and the Houston Rockets in the first round. Now, given that the Rockets won the first 2 games of the series without Russell Westbrook, most of the people were expecting this to be a sweep or a 5-game series, but Chris Paul would turn it up in the overtime of Game 3 and lead the Thunder to a Game 4 win to tie the series, and they would win Game 6 to force a Game 7, and only lost Game 7 by 2 points. With his future being unknown at the time of this video, we can only really look back on his career so far and see that he's accomplished a lot during his 15 seasons in the league. He's a 10-time All-Star, 9-time All-NBA, 9-time All-Defense with 7 first-team selections, 4-time steals leader, 6-time assists leader, and Rookie of the Year. He's consistently been one of the best two-way players in the league while being just 6 feet tall. And while a championship would obviously add to his legacy, I feel like this is more than enough to warrant a first ballot Hall of Fame selection. And while I've hated him at times because of the flopping and the constant complaining to the refs, I do have to acknowledge that he is one of the greatest point guards that we will ever see, and probably the greatest true point guard of this generation, because he deserves to be recognized as such. But with all that being said, I want to know what you guys think of Chris Paul possibly being one of the greatest point guards of all time. Do you think he deserves that honor, or do you think he still has a little bit more to prove? Let me know what you think. But with all that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Subscribe if you're new, hit the bell to be notified when I upload, comment down below what you want to see next, and as always, I'll see you guys in the next one.